So let's do this. This is a question that we ask everybody. What are your what's your 1 year prediction? Next year bots are gonna be like this, and have it be voice and chatbots too, and then give me a 20-year prediction.
Okay. Which one do you want to do?
Yeah, no. So I would say in the next year, we're going to slowly, and I don't know if it's going to be a year or 2 years, but I would say if it were to be narrowed down just to a year, we're going to slowly move out of the early adopters phase. And it's going to be more of a mass market kind of thing where, when you ask your friends like, hey, have you interacted with a chatbot yet? They might not have one that they go to every single day, or they might not, necessarily use one every single day, but they will know what one is and will have interacted with one by that point. Whereas right now, I'd imagine it doesn't really matter what your network is. If you ask your friends, have you played with a chatbot yet? Or have you interacted with a chatbot yet? They will most likely say no. So I think we're going to move out of that phase. And I also think in that next year, we're also going to start to see the early stage of voice bots kind of be more heavy, to where people will start to realize that, Alexa chatbots within the voice system, Google Home chatbots, they're all going to slowly start being implemented to the voice systems as well. Whereas now us as chatbot developers, we'll start working on that and we'll start building chatbots for other companies. I think that's kind of where it'll happen. But at that point, no one will still know that, really what a chatbot is. It'll just be the developers and the early adopters that kind of understand or have heard about it at that point in time.
Yeah, I think to go off of that as well, totally agreed that, within a year, I think everyone's going to have at least once interacted with a chatbot, just because of how often, 2 billion messages are sent between users and businesses every month on Messenger, probably more at this point. So because of that, it just makes sense that just the number of people messaging businesses and all those businesses slowly starting to bring on chatbots, everyone's going to have interacted with a bot at least once, even if they didn't realize it and they thought it was for some reason another human on the other side. Nonetheless, they all will interact with the chatbot. And then in terms of voice, and I'll kind of build up to the 20-year prediction here. I think within 2 years, not exactly a year, but we can say a year here for the circumstances, I think that a lot of people will have Alexa and Google Assistant, and Apple just came out with their voice system as well. They'll have that inside of their homes, so that, slowly we're getting to the Internet of Things within all of your devices and everywhere that you go on a daily basis. But for now, I think within a year, people will start to implement that more in their homes. And then in 20 years, I've talked a lot about this actually with a good number of people in voice bots who are working on Alexa at Amazon, and some people in the Google Assistant space. That soon, we'll have all of those voice bots available in public places, like parks. You go to a restaurant and you're being attended to by a voice bot. Wherever it is that we go, we're going to have public bots that we talk to about, services. And then when you get into your car and when you go to your home, then you're going to have a private version, right? Where it's more, you're talking about more sensitive information, like maybe ordering stuff off of Amazon that you need that you wouldn't necessarily want to order in public, right? So I think we're really going to get to that development within the next 20 years to just have them everywhere, accessible to everyone.
Yeah, I think that, but in 20 years, voice bots are going to be in literally every facet of your daily life, in some way, shape, or form, whether it's your smart home or whether it's a company-made voice bot, whether you're in your car, any of those scenarios, right? Imagine if we could make Siri 1,000 times better than she is right now, but then bring her with us everywhere we're going, and we don't actually have to hold her in our hand, that's pretty much going to be what I imagine the world's going to be like, in 20 years, where we walk home and we have our voice bot there that we can talk to and interact with. And it'll be smart enough for us to, be able to speak to it like a human. You jump in your car, same scenario, right? You go into a public setting, same scenario. You'll just be so used to interact. And that all will kind of come back to right now where we are with chatbots, right? This is the first time that we're actually trying to mass implement teaching or feeling, like you can interact with a robot essentially in a human way. That'll all come back to right now in the very beginning of chatbots where we're seeing right now. So I think that's kind of what the world will look like in 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something that came up in our conversation, we got to interview and have the CVP of AI for Microsoft. So she runs bot framework, their NLP Lewis, and their their cognitive services. And one thing she noted was that these bots, whether it's a voice or chatbot, they're supposed to make our interface easier with harder things. Like they're supposed to make our lives easier. So, for example, let's just say that you download a new piece of software because of a task that you have to accomplish. Instead of having to look through the manual over and learn things as you go, you can just say, hey, do X, Y, and Z for me. And it accomplishes that for you. So, her case was that this layer of voice, especially voice, is going to help people with less access, meaning, maybe the more senile people, the people who don't have technology every day, who didn't grow up with an iPhone or a Pixel or whatever, that they can be able to interface with harder technologies that usually took years and years to get used to or learn. Yeah. So that was really insightful. I feel like a lot of this chatbots right now and voice, it's like very commercial, and it makes sense, right? Like everyone's trying to build products to make money. This is a business, etc. But I'm really curious to see who makes a dent in actually interfacing. Right, I feel like Alexa is doing a pretty good job because they make those Alexa chips that they can insert into cars, and pretty sure they'll put it into like refrigerators and TVs so that they have the interface there. But I'm really curious to see who's gonna scale it out.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And then speaking of which, something I like to add on a little bit is it's fascinating what people create, how they can really go on to that next level. And I mean, something that someone was brought out before was sentiment analysis, right, where the bot can determine if you're feeling sad or happy, and how to take the course of action to, really understand what's going on with that person. With people feeling sometimes disconnected, the bot can actually be a connection source towards the mental health that can really help. So I'm really looking forward to see how bots can really bring health, just true health, into our lives. Because when you look at technology, it does that in all different kind of ways, right? And how can a bot do that? People, one of the first things they don't like about a bot is like, I'm not talking to a human. This is not what I feel. This is natural. And yet it has the power and capability, if done right, if created right, to truly affect those people who are the lonely ones, who do those things who needs to feel just a sense of touch, who needs to feel a sense of connection. And I feel bots can do that. And that's what I look forward to in that 1 to 20 year range. And it can happen much sooner. So yeah, that's what I just wanted to add on to that.
Yeah, there.
10 minutes or so, we'll just do a discussion around what we feel is important to talk about in bots, whether it's some sort of problem that we want to solve or where we see a lot of opportunity. I'll go ahead and start that part of the conversation. One is, so Verizon, not to put them on the spot, like their customer support, this sucks. Whenever you go there to switch a phone or whatever, you're there for hours. Like it doesn't matter what problem it is, you're in there for hours because the person is on the phone trying to figure things out. I feel like that is a huge opportunity for you guys or for anyone watching in terms of enterprise customer support. And two, the one that I'm most passionate about and attracted to is like having a bot in our world and meaning developed countries where we grew up with phones and we're used to interfacing this type of stuff. Having a bot is kind of marginal. It's a marginal improvement because we have so many other options. We have the internet, we have MacBooks, we can do whatever. But I think in those developing countries, having access to whether it's education, healthcare, or someone across the line, or some sort of trained professional, right? I feel like that is a bigger improvement to their lives and their experience. So I'm always interested to see what kind of companies or projects are focusing on those populations where, as I said, like the experience isn't marginal, but it's a leap. And you can imagine people who lack access to, let's just say, some sort of training on agriculture or some sort of training with vaccines or or access to healthcare or mental whatever.
And then those beautiful parts of the broadcasting part, coming back to it, making sure you understood that task. And if you don't pass that, bot can come back to you over and over and over again. So that's something that with the education part that can really bring that next, I can even say like help in the best way possible. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, well, one, like going back to your point about mental health, I think that's definitely going to be a huge thing, especially for voice bots, because it's going to feel more natural than typing to a chatbot, because you can actually talk everything out rather than having to write everything, and then you might just not include everything, whatever it is. I think a voice bot will just feel more natural. So I think that'll definitely come once that is more heavily adopted. But I have seen a couple examples of messenger bots that are trying to do that. The problem just is that, the AI and the NLP on Messenger isn't really strong enough to fully fulfill that for people. People who are lonely, like, yeah, they can go and type to the bot, but at the end of the day, it's not going to be as effective as it will be, in a year when they can talk to Alexa or Google Assistant or maybe even Siri. Another one that can actually fulfill that need of, just having a friend or having someone to talk to. Because it's not on Messenger. I don't know if you guys have heard of Replica.ai, but it's for those of the people who are listening who haven't heard of it, it's pretty much a app that you get on your phone, and it is a chatbot, but it's super smart. So it starts to, as it's conversing with you, it starts to know and like talk about like your family, your job, like all these different features of your life. And so it sounds kind of creepy, like just putting it like that right now. But for someone who goes on there and just wants to have something or someone, to connect with, to talk to about whatever it is, kind of like journaling almost, kind of like a modern form of journaling. I think that's an interesting way that they have kind of positioned themselves so that the people who are interacting with their bot just feel like there's someone listening to them, every day when they go on there and interact with it, because it's starting to get to know them. And so I think that's a really cool kind of first view of what is to come. Like you mentioned earlier, totally being able to talk to a voice bot all day, pretty much, if you just are super introvert, or maybe you're like away from family and friends and everyone's busy, whatever it is. I think that voice bots will definitely be able to fill that void later on.
Yeah, I don't think it's on. I don't think it's Replica. I don't think it's on Messenger, but there is a chatbot that. Yeah, no, I don't think what I'm talking about is Replica though. There's a chatbot that you start to talk to it. You do the same thing that what she just talked about how you kind of talk to it. It asks you questions. It starts to get to know you. But this one in particular starts to gather as much information about like your personality, your tone of voice, how you respond to things. And then after so much time of using it, the longer you use it, obviously the smarter it's going to be. It's built so that when you pass away, your family and friends can actually like talk to you, and have you respond the way that you would have responded in real life, because it has spent so much time analyzing your diction and syntax and behavior and personality. And then it takes in like all these traits into account and then kind of creates a digital version of yourself so that, you can go and talk to your family and friends after you pass away.
Yeah, there's the follow-up for your bot, Richard. You just have to link up with them.
Yeah. Was that like a Black Mirror episode, or is that actually live?
No, this is a real thing. It sounds a little bit like a Black Mirror episode, but it's this girl created it because her friend passed away in a car accident pretty young. And she pretty much built this bot out. She's a hardcore digital coder. She built this bot out and went in and shoved in all of the texts and all of the information that she's ever had, email correspondence, every conversation they've ever had, plugged it through the chatbot, and then the chatbot created a kind of a digital version of her friend that had passed away. And so she started talking to it, and then, it starts analyzing their conversation, and like it's super smart. And yeah, that currently exists.
It makes me think like, all of us then could essentially do this and have our own live bot at all times that, hey, you want to get to know this personality or person. Like if you put the time into it, like you don't have to be dead for it to be like working, right?
Yeah. No, that's
right. No, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Our engineer Ruben's working on that. Yeah. It's called like generative modeling, right?
Yeah.
You put it through a neural net and it starts talking like. Would you guys use that? Would you guys be okay with that?
I don't know. I think it's kind of like a circumstantial thing where like once you're talking to it, then maybe you're comfortable with it. But when I'm thinking about it right now, I'm like, I don't know if I'd enjoy that or like want to do that for like an extended amount of time. But maybe once we like get used to it, right, and like continue to talk to it, then it just doesn't feel that weird and you're like totally okay with it. So I don't know how to answer that right now.
There will be a moment where you're going through it and you're learning about yourself. You're like, am I really like this? Like, wait a minute. Wait, is this really me? I was always quiet and just chill. Like, what's going on here? But that's interesting. I like that. I like that a lot. It really gets me thinking. I look forward to bilingual bots where they literally, no matter what languages are, anywhere, so therefore everyone's connected. Communication is one of the biggest things that happens in our lives. And I feel like it helps towards the right course. And bilingual bots, multilingual bots, I really feel can be a great difference maker in the near future towards.
Yeah, that'll definitely increase with the build of AI and NLP as that gets stronger. It'll be much easier to go ahead and implement bilingual bots. We've actually created bilingual bots, but manually, right? Because Natasha speaks Spanish and Japanese, so it's like we've gone in and like created manually bilingual bots where people can go through separate pathways. But
yeah, it's definitely not though ideal, right? Because it's like if you get off course for any reason, or I mean, just again, the AI is not strong enough. So if they say something that like looks like English because the characters are exactly the same, then they might get taken off the Spanish pathway and like put on the English one by accident. There's no like 100% guarantee that they're going to have a successful conversation. And then also there's a really big challenge too with languages that have other characters other than like the Latin characters that we use, in English and in Spanish, kind of all the like Latin romantic languages pretty much. The other ones like say Farsi or like Chinese, those are really difficult right now for AI engines like Dialogflow to process. So there's really not too much success right now with countries that want to do that. Like one of my friends created a Vietnamese and English bot, and it's just so difficult for the bot to process stuff that, it's still such an early stage, I think, for that. But I think that's definitely coming in the next few years as, AI gets smarter and we're able to just find a way for AI engines to process all of those other very confusing characters for engines that are used to only looking at like Romance language characters.
Yeah, that definitely will be different. Yeah. What you got?
I want to hear you guys' opinion on this. I think a big thing, like whenever there's a new technology that people are trying to implement, I think a big thing that comes up is interoperability. They use that term in healthcare. Like, for example, there's like things called electronic health records. It's when you go to a doctor and it's electronic now, but because there's different companies, they don't work together. It's kind of like having, like an Alexa and then a Facebook Messenger and then like a Google Home. They don't all work together. I'm curious to see, and I feel like the winner of that race will be the company that gives the best experience and is seamless into their everyday life, so that it can collect data continuously, whether you're using it or not. So like, I'm sure like the first the company that can get glasses right for AR, because you're going to be wearing that every day and like you're going to be talking to it. It's going to be collecting your visual your visual roadmap. So I feel like a company that does well is going to be the one that can have the most seamless experience, collect the most data, and be that ground source where you interact with other bots. Because Lily said this, she said, a bot is only as smart as your last conversation, right? It can't continuously compound on that. And if you stop talking to this bot and you talk to this bot, that other bot you're talking to for the first time, it has to start that whole conversation again because it doesn't know anything about you.
Oh, previous to it. Okay.
Yeah. So,
well, like you're saying, the integration, so make sure that.
Right.
Okay.
So I'm curious to know your thoughts on who's going to win in this race for voice and chatbots, and who's going to be number one in interoperability.
Yeah. I would say that, just kind of go along with what you said, right? It's who's going to like make the most seamless transition from their current position in the market to every single facet of your life, right? And like if you look at it, it's most likely up between, you know, like Amazon and Google, right? So, but at that point, and in my personal opinion, is that Amazon's going to win the race. But at that point, like I need to be able to be confident in talking to Alexa in my house. I need to order food from her, clothes. You know, Amazon's working on like tons of other projects like housekeeping and on all sorts of different things, right? So pretty much if I can get 60% of my stuff from you right now, how hard is it going to be for you to pivot into me being comfortable with you in the car, me being comfortable with you in my business, in my ear all the time, maybe in my wallet, in my credit card, my phone, my wallet? Like how many pieces of my life are you going to be able to seamlessly transition to where I'll say, okay, do away with Google or do away with Apple or do away with, you know, or Tesla, whoever it is at that point, and kind of have every single facet of your life be Amazon. If you want to really focus on just interoperability, then that's kind of going to be what's going to have to happen, because there's always going to be proprietary differences. You know, you're going to always have a problem of having Amazon this and Google that and Apple this. They're never going to say, you know what, yeah, let's just open it up so we can all talk to each other. Like, no, why would they do that when they can build a product that competes with the other person that you're wanting to have interoperate, right? So I would say that Amazon has the best likelihood, in my opinion. And my background, I come from a private investing, individual stock kind of background. So like I have spent so many hours analyzing, you know, companies like Amazon and Tesla and Google, and like being on their quarterly calls and so on and so forth. And I honestly think that Amazon is probably going to win that area in life where they now control some aspect of every part of your daily life.
Why? Why do you say that?
Just because they have, like I said, the easiest transition for me to adopt them as. I'm already comfortable going on there and ordering food on my phone. I can push a button by my toilet and get toilet paper, you know. I can read an audible book, you know, like all sorts of different things that they have. I can go into a grocery store and grab food and walk out without talking to a cashier. Like, I mean, they're already doing things that are far and above other companies out there that are being mass implemented, whereas other companies have technologies like that, but they're nowhere near being mass implemented at this point in time or mass adopted. So I think that Amazon right now will be the easiest person for us to accept as that kind of like holy grail of everything in my daily life can. But, you know, of course there's going to be, it's not like everyone's just going to have Amazon everything, right? Like someone could have a Tesla everything, you know, in 10, 20 years, right? Their car, house, sound system, food, all electronics could be Tesla powered, right? Or Google for that matter. So I definitely think that Amazon is going to be like the well-known average mass adopted one that we see is that most places, most people that aren't tech savvy, that don't have opinions heavy in the tech world, they're just going to have Amazon because it'll be a seamless transition from where they're already using it in their life.
Yeah, I think so. Because it's just more of like, I think the best way to kind of think about it is like, in the sales process, you know, you're consistently trying to get that prospect to say yes. And so you're starting with a really easy yes and then slowly moving towards like a more expensive and harder to pitch yes. So I think in the same way, it's like, it's so easy to go on Amazon and be like, okay, I need this lotion or this food or whatever. And then slowly like, okay, Alexa just came out. Well, that makes sense, you know, so then that's a bigger, more expensive yes. And then eventually, you know, to like full house systems or whatever it is that they come out with next, that is like the more expensive step up, I think is kind of the best way or like simplest way to look at it is just, it's easy for people to say yes to them versus if you're looking at Google or Apple right now, it's like, yeah, I have an iPhone, but I don't really go to Apple for anything other than just like using the applications on my phone or something. So if they came out with, say, something like Amazon where they allowed you to order all of these things for your house, like you probably wouldn't go to them because it's just easier. And Amazon just has that reputation, I think, over just so many years of doing this and having all of these innovative products that actually work versus like Apple's kind of reputation of always kind of having things that break and all the conspiracies that are like behind it, right? Of things breaking, hardware and software not matching up. There's just lots of different variables, right? But that was just something that came to mind that I think it's just also going to be a reputation thing. But I think I'll be interested to see most like how these different big systems talk to each other. Cause kind of like Kyle said, like there will probably be, again, just like we are with brands right now, like some people are more of like a Nike person. Someone is like all into Adidas. Those are just kind of like two big examples, right? So in the same way, I think people will be very much like, I'm Tesla everything, I'm Google everything, I'm Apple everything, I'm Alexa everything. So it'll be interesting to see how that grows and how those companies start to talk about whether their applications will be able to talk to each other so that people can have kind of like a mixed home of like half Google, half Alexa, and still be able to have those apps talk to each other. Because I think that just makes sense, you know, in a market like this, and pretty much for anything, like there's only really a market if there's competition, at least right now. That may change, right, as we implement like the Internet of Things with everything, but I think that will still hold true for the next couple of centuries. It's just going to make sense that our technology is only going to improve if there's competition. So I don't think it's going to entirely make sense for just one company to take over, at least, you know, in the near future. Maybe like towards the end of our lifetime, you know, there will be one big company that starts to buy out all of those and then just implement their native technologies. But I think during our lifetime, it'll mostly just be a competitive race between, you know, 3-4 big companies that are trying to do all of what we've kind of been discussing.
Yeah, I'm curious to see, you know, if you look at life today, I mean, not life, but like if you look at professionals today, like mostly graphic designers, and like movie producers or editors, they like to use Mac. Like they like Apple interfaces. But if you go to enterprise or corporate, most of them, they don't really have Macs. You know, it's still Windows, right? And like, you know, I'm curious to see how these companies will carve out their positions and being like, okay, voice and chatbots, e-commerce, if you want to buy something, okay, Amazon, we're number one at that. Everyone else, like, there's no one that comes close.
Mm-hmm.
But what if it's something like, you know, you want to get work done and you want to interface with, let's just say, SharePoint and Google Doc and etc. Microsoft Cortana, we got that.
Mm-hmm.
That's done. And then Google could be something different. I'm really interested to see how that's going to play out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that kind of like follows the thought that that I discussed, where like, yeah, there's still going to continue to be competition, and like people are going to be all in kind of on one thing. Like you said, some people are totally MacBook, some people are totally Android, some people are like, I love iPhone, and some people are like, screw iPhone, like Android all the way, right? There's always kind of be these like, what is the best way to say that? Kind of like true followers of the brands, right? And as those grow, then I think it'll also be interesting again to see those different integrations, because yeah, you're right. There will be companies that are the go-to for a specific thing, like, you know, Amazon e-commerce, for example. So I think, yeah, it'll just really kind of depend on what each company is able to become the number one of the quickest. I think that'll be more of the big race right now. Like Amazon is kind of the perfect example of that, right? They want to be number one in these specific types of markets. They're not trying to be number one of everything right now. They're just trying to be number one of specific markets. So I think in the same way, it's kind of a race to dominate each specific part of our lives and then like subcategories of that, rather than trying to dominate everything right now. So I think that's kind of the race that we'll see between those companies.